Hey guys, today we're going to talk about close reading. So, what is close reading? This is a study of the detail in a short section of a text and an explanation of how that detail and how that section are related to the entire text. So, this is when we really start to break down a text, to break down a piece of literature and focus in on smaller sections and more minute details rather than looking at the piece as a whole. So, it's a way for us to read and work with a text that helps us move beyond comprehension into creating our interpretation and helping us analyze the text, okay? It helps us get from a literal understanding to an inferential understanding of the text. So rather than just reading the story and understanding the plot, understanding like what's actually happening in the story, close reading allows us to understand what the text means, okay, underneath. We talked about subtext before. Close reading is how we figure out what is being said in the subtext, okay? So sometimes this looks like looking at a specific chapter and figuring out how that chapter connects to the entire text, but more common than that, especially in a literature class, is we are taking bits and pieces of different chapters. Sometimes we're going sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph, and really like pulling out the nitty-gritty details, trying to figure out exactly what the author is trying to tell us. When we close read, we are kind of acting as detectives in some way, right? The author has left us clues, like sprinkled throughout the entire story, whether that's through symbolism, imagery, character development, all things that we'll talk about later. But they've left us clues for us to pick up on to figure out what is the actual meaning of the text. And so if we're looking at a text as a whole, it's difficult for us to find those clues. They're kind of hidden. And so when we start to break down a text in shorter, smaller pieces, we can really focus and find those clues, add those clues together, and, create our own interpretation from them. These are the four main steps to close reading. So first and foremost, we have to read the section of text carefully. So we read the entire, let's say we're looking at a chapter. We read the whole chapter and we want to go back and break it down into smaller pieces. Read the section of text carefully. Don't just speed through it. Take your time to actually go through it. Read it several times. After the first time you've read it, that's when you want to go back and start annotating the text. If you've never heard of annotations before, you will now, because it's going to be a very important part of this class. Annotating a text is essentially when you are reading, you are physically marking up the text. So it's different than taking notes on the side. It's like physically writing in the book, having post-it notes in the book. If you're reading digitally, you are highlighting and writing little notes in the margins, but again, still on the actual text, not on like a separate document, okay? When we annotate, we need to incorporate more than highlighting, more than leaving symbols, right? When we highlight something, that tells us that we thought it was important when we read it. Let's say we go through our little section of text and then we go back and we start reading it again and we see all these things that we highlighted and maybe marked with a symbol. That tells us that we thought it was important, yes, but it doesn't tell us why we thought it was important. So that's why annotations require more than just underlining, just highlighting, just symbols. You need to document your thought process on the document itself, right? So if I am doing an annotation check and you come up and you show me your piece and I'm only seeing highlighting, only underlining, there's no written words, I'm not going to give you credit for that because it's not annotating. In order for something to be considered annotating is you have to like write words, phrases, sentences on the actual text itself, documenting your thought process as you read. The reason annotating is so important is it forces you to actually engage with the text. It's very easy when we're just reading a piece of literature to kind of maybe zone out a little bit, even when we're not realizing we are. I can't even tell you how many times I have read an entire essay for one of my classes, and I finish it, and I realize that I wasn't actually paying attention. My eyes were just looking at the words and not comprehending or absorbing anything. Annotating prevents that, right? You are actively engaging with the text, writing on it. There's no way for you to zone out if you're doing that. So annotating is super, super important. If you have questions on annotating or you don't understand exactly, what the requirements are, please ask me. I'm happy to help. I really want to give you those extra credit points for annotation checks. So it's important that you know how to do it. In this week's module on Canvas, I've actually uploaded an example of an annotation, like a good solid annotation. So take a look at that if you are needing some more clarification or reassurance that you do actually know what annotating looks like. Okay, so we've read the text, we're annotating it. Now it's time for us to identify literary conventions, okay? So what this means is like literary terminology that you've heard before. So themes, symbols, settings, motifs, things like that. We'll talk about specific literary conventions today and as we continue throughout the semester. But when you're close reading, it's important for you to notice these things. So if in a specific section, a window keeps appearing, right? It just is repeating over and over again. That's probably important, right? That window probably symbolizes something. So that's important for you to note that symbolism is being used here. Then once you've pulled out all these literary conventions, you can connect them and explain how these conventions reflect the text's meaning and implications. So I've pulled out all of these details from this section. What do I get when I add all of these things together, right? It's almost like a recipe, right? Put a little symbolism in here, add a dash of setting. When you mix all of that together, what do you get? That should be your interpretation, right? So close reading is super important, and I really want to make sure we understand how to do it. So again, if you have any questions, please, please, please let me know and we can go through them together. So this isn't by any means a comprehensive list of important literary terms or literary conventions. These are only 3. We will expand throughout the entire semester, but for now, at the beginning of the semester, these are the 3 that I want us to focus on. We've got theme, conflict, and then symbols and symbolism. Let's start with theme. So a theme is the main idea, the lesson, or like the message in the text, like the underlying meaning of a literary work. This is like when you read a piece and you think back, like, what is being said here? Yes, I understand what's happening in the story, like plot-wise, but what lesson is being taught here? Like, how can I connect what's happening here to like the broader world around me? Themes usually state an idea about like humanity, society, life in general. It's looking at like big picture stuff, okay? Many different themes can exist within a single text. This is kind of where interpretation comes in and theory, right? Depending on what lens we're looking at it from. So, just like a text can have more than one interpretation, text can have many, many, many different themes. So whenever you're looking for a theme or like, trying to analyze a text to figure out what the theme is, don't box yourself into just like one single theme. Challenge yourself and think to yourself, okay, what are the different lessons that are being taught here? Like, are there different main ideas or different messages that are coming through this text? Theme is extremely important, and we will talk about that throughout the semester. So it's important that you have like a good basis or like a good foundation or an understanding of what theme is. There is a difference between a theme and a motif, and I really need you to understand the difference, okay? This is kind of like one of those peeves of mine that like really bother me when people don't understand the difference. That's just like a personal hang up of mine, but I really want you to understand the difference. So a theme or themes are complete sentences. So for example, if you continuously lie, people won't believe you when you're telling the truth. So that's the theme of the story of like the little boy who cried wolf, right? So the lesson that's being taught there is if you continuously lie, people don't believe you when you're actually telling the truth. So that's a theme. It's a complete sentence. Motifs, on the other hand, are short phrases like a word or a concept. So honesty, truth. The little boy who cried wolf, that story is about honesty. It is about truth, right? It's about being reliable. But again, those aren't complete sentences, so that would be considered a motif. So again, themes are complete sentences. Motifs are just like short little phrases or abstract concepts. If you are ever like struggling to figure out a theme of a text, but you understand a motif, there's kind of like a simple way to figure it out. So let's say you read a poem, okay? And I ask you, like, what is this poem talking about? What is this poem saying? And you tell me, oh, this poem is talking about love. I in turn would ask you, okay, what is the poem saying about love? So yes, it's about love, but what is the author saying about love? And when you answer that question, the answer is the theme, okay? So if you are struggling trying to find the theme, but you understand the motifs, just ask yourself, like, what is the author saying about this motif, okay? And that'll kind of force you into like a different way of thinking. And when you answer the question, it needs to be in a complete sentence. And when you have that complete sentence, that's the theme. So conflict. Conflict is the heart of the story. It is like the tension that pushes the story forward. If there's no conflict, if there's no tension, then nothing really happens at all, and it's super boring. So conflict is important. It normally revolves around the main character, right? The main character is trying to figure out something, or is on a quest, or, you know, whatever it is. But there's this struggle, this tension that revolves around the main character that pushes the story forward. There are two different types of conflict. We have external and internal conflict. So external is like the struggle or tension that exists outside of the self, okay? So if the main character is trying to get to school, but there is a tornado and it's making it difficult for him to get to school, like the external conflict is like character versus tornado, right? External, outside of the character itself. Internal conflict is the opposite. It's the struggle or tension that exists like within the self. So if a character is like struggling with self-doubt, or they have like, confidence issues, or if they're like really grieving, there's a struggle inside, like emotionally, mentally, spiritually. That's what an internal conflict is. More often than not, at the level that we're reading literature, we're really interested in the internal conflict, okay? We want to know what's going on, like, beneath, the surface of the character. This is going to be particularly important or significant when we start talking about psychoanalytic theory, which is all about, like, diving into the mind of characters. But regardless of, like, whatever theory you're using or lens that you're reading through, internal conflict is very important to understand. Okay, last but certainly not least of today's literary conventions are symbols and symbolism. So these two words sound very similar. They're almost the same word, but they are different, okay? So symbols are like something that represents something else. A symbol is a concrete item that represents an abstract concept. So the symbol is the concrete item, like a physical thing, whereas the symbolism is the abstract concept that the symbol represents, okay? So a symbol itself can be an object, a person, a place, like an action, and the symbol or the symbolism is what that thing represents, okay? So a certain quality or attitude, belief, some kind of like value or morality, okay? But what's really important to know is symbols are the concrete item. Symbolism is the abstract concept that the symbol represents, okay? We talked about clues already, but again, this is like a very commonly used device that authors use as clues for us to figure out the themes or the meanings, or help us create our own interpretations of a text. So take a look at these 4 examples. So what we have here on the left are symbols, right? Concrete items. An American flag is a thing. Mother Teresa is a person. A church is a place. Lighting a candle is an action. Okay, so all concrete things. Yes. What do these things symbolize? Okay. Take a second, pause the video, and I want you to write down a couple different things that you think each of these symbols might represent. Again, you're looking for like abstract concepts. We have our symbols, which are like the concrete things. What do these concrete items represent? What more abstract concepts are being represented here? So go ahead, pause the video, take the next 30-ish seconds, and then we'll go ahead and move forward. Okay, hopefully you paused and did that. If you did not, then I'm sure that little pause was kind of awkward and silent. But these are those this is the symbolism that I've come up with. So an American flag symbolizes freedom. Mother Teresa symbolizes some kind of like goodness, okay? A church is symbolic of purity, and lighting a candle, that can mean a lot of things. Like people light candles when they're in mourning. Sometimes lighting a candle can be some kind of romance or seduction, right? But I really want to make sure we understand the difference between symbols and symbolism. I'm going to repeat it again. I know it's probably annoying, but I really kind of want to like hit you over the head to make sure you understand. So a symbol is a concrete item that represents some kind of like abstract concept, which is symbolism. So how do we know, how to recognize a symbol? Like, how do we know if an object is actually symbolizing something or if it's just like a random apple sitting on a table, right? Repetition is really important. So if you see the same like object, place, action, like showing up over and over and over again, the author is probably trying to like really show you, hey, this thing means something, okay? So if you see something repeating in a text, that's probably a symbol, okay? Details that bring attention to the item. So let's say there is an apple on the table and the author spends like 4 or 5 sentences like really describing this apple, bringing a lot of attention to it. That is the author saying, hey, pay attention to this thing that I'm telling you about. It's going to be important later on. It's going to symbolize something, okay? So repetition and details that bring attention to an item. Lastly, examine the title of a story. So this is something that people often kind of neglect. We read the title of a story and then we move on from it. But if there is an object mentioned in the title, that's probably a symbol. So this semester we will read The Yellow Wallpaper together. The wallpaper is in the name of the title, right? So that should tell you it's going to be super important. So if something shows up in the title and if it's being repeated in the story and if it's, has a lot of really detailed description, like a symbol doesn't need all 3 of these things at the same time to be a symbol, but these are the things that you really need to pay attention to when trying to recognize what is a symbol and what is not. Okay, so let's say you have decided that an object is a symbol for one of those 3 reasons we talked about. What next? How do we interpret the symbol? How do we figure out what the symbol means? So first, you need to examine the object's qualities. Like, is this super round? Is it new? Is it old? Is it industrial? Like, what are the object's qualities? Once you figure that out, you need to apply those qualities to the context being used in the story, okay? Once you've done those things, then consider how the symbol highlights the theme of the overall story. Here's an example for you to look at. So the example we're going to think about is Katniss Everdeen's bow from The Hunger Games. So what are the qualities of these things? So first, it's an offensive weapon. It is normally very primitive, and it's used in defensive measures and also to hunt, right? The context that it's being used in is one, it's used in the actual Hunger Games. The bow gets more advanced as the story continues, and it's used directly to defy the Capitol, okay? So when we consider all of those qualities and all of those contexts, we can connect them and come to this other interpretation. So this bow symbolizes Katniss's natural abilities to hunt and protect, okay? So being used as a weapon, it's used to hunt, it's primitive. Katniss's natural abilities to hunt and protect. It also advances in technology. The advances in technology symbolize her growth and transformation throughout the series, right? So we start with this very primitive bow and arrow, and as we continue throughout the story, it gets more advanced, it gets better and better, just like Katniss, right? She grows throughout the story, and the bow reflects that. The journey of the bow reflects the journey of Katniss, essentially, right? So again, we have to connect these qualities and consider the context that this is being used in, and then we can make a connection to figure out what this symbol actually means, how we interpret the symbols. All right, that is the end of our lecture. I know I just threw a lot of information at you, so I anticipate for you to have questions, and that's great. Come to class, be ready to ask those questions, and we will work through them together. I'll see you guys next time.